Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our panelists. Executive Vice President, Corporate Relations, Allstate Insurance Company, Joan Walker. Founder, Triple Thread Apparel, Kyle McCollom. President, Cuyahoga Community College, Jerry Sue Thornton. Director, National Domestic Workers Alliance, Ai-jen Poo. Founder, Chairman and CEO, Operation Hope, Inc., John Hope Bryant. And our moderator, board member, Clinton Global Initiative and William J. Clinton Foundation, Chelsea Clinton.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us over lunch for a conversation about pathways to opportunity. We actually began CGI America with a progress report from Year Up and heard from the remarkable Kai Smith about how Year Up had truly given him a pathway to opportunity, enabling him to move from 2 restaurant jobs that he clearly, if you heard him speak, did not find fulfilling or challenging, to working for Radio 1 in Baltimore, fulfilling a lifelong dream. And I think that the fact we started with such a progress report not only demonstrates our commitment at CGI to holding our commitment makers in the best sense accountable, but also how fundamentally we believe it's important to focus on solutions and on the barriers that exist to the solutions that we know work. And I hope that that's really what we'll talk about here today. And I think you'll hear from our panelists how critical this conversation is to the parts of our country that are currently confronting and suffering from the unemployment crisis most acutely, particularly our former offenders and our young people. We now know unequivocally that if a person who spends a year at 23 unemployed compared to a similar person from the same socioeconomic background, the same parental education, the same IQ level, having obtained the same education from himself, carries that so-called now wage scar for the rest of his life. So that 10 years later, he'll be earning 23% less than someone who spent 23 employed. 10 years after that, at 43, he'll be earning 15% less. He never catches up. It's not as dramatic for women, but it's still significant. For a woman who spends 23 unemployed, at 33, she's earning 16% less than someone from the exact same demographic profile who was employed at 23. And 10 years after that, she's earning 12% less. Similarly, she never catches up. So we have to figure out what the right pathways to opportunity are for all Americans, but particularly for young Americans. Because if we don't, this is a challenge that will follow them and all of us for the rest of their and our lives. And so to give us a sense of really how this debate is finally now percolating out and how people in this country, across this country, are feeling about what the current opportunities are and what the solutions they know really would best meet the needs of them and their families. I'd like for Joan to kick us off a little bit to talk about, to be fair to her, I told her she was going to go second.
Surprised.
To tell us a little bit about the Heartland Survey and what you've learned and what people know are the right opportunities for them and yet why they aren't able to capture them.
Sure. Thanks very much, Chelsea. For the last almost 3.5 years, Allstate, in partnership with the National Journal, have been conducting research among middle-class Americans about their sentiments and attitudes and concerns navigating the Great Recession and the recovery afterwards. And what we've learned is instructive in so many ways and relevant to the work that my fellow panelists have been doing with great passion and great success. What we've learned is that the American dream is alive and well in the minds of middle-class Americans. 2/3 of Americans believe that they are living the American dream, which has been defined as, can you use your talents and hard work to get as far in the world as you would like to get? And secondly, will you have a better life in terms of economic and financial stability than your parents? So overwhelmingly, Americans believe that despite the recession, despite the loss of value in their 401ks and their homes, the American dream is alive and well. Interestingly, though, in the most recent poll that we conducted and we released yesterday, while 2/3 of Americans believe that they are living the American dream, as many say that other Americans are not. So there is really a disconnect there between what people are experiencing themselves and what they're perceiving are the opportunities that other Americans don't have. People of color are largely much more optimistic for their futures, and white men of all age groups are less optimistic about their futures as well. The other thing among the other things that we learned is, and this runs through the course of all 13 of our polls, that there is a very significant degree of mistrust among institutions in support of the American middle class. Largely, the overwhelming majority believe that institutions that they have long looked to for support and assistance are just not there, have not been there, and probably won't be there. So what we've seen is this tremendous resilience, what I think of as a very resolute self-reliance on oneself, which may be uniquely American, but it is certainly there through the course of all 13 of these polls.
And Joe, why does Allstate care about this work, and what do you take from the finding that Americans are more distrustful than at least at any other point of your survey history of institutions like yours?
Right. Well, in 2009, when we started the poll, or the polling series, we were watching the collapse of financial institutions, the loss of value in personal income, the rapidly increasing joblessness rate, and a questioning of the value of a 4-year education, whether in fact it was a pathway to the middle class or whether it was a burden from which you could never earn your way out of. And being a company that represents 16 million American households, mostly middle class, we believed it was a responsibility of ours not to sit on the sideline, but to do two things. One, to really learn what the concerns and hopes as well are of the American middle class, so we could develop products and services that would better support their needs and help their financial stability and security. And secondly, we also believed strongly that it was a responsibility to help give a voice to the middle class, a voice that was perhaps muffled by the amplified voices of the extreme rights and lefts of America. So we wanted to give that voice and to have their voice heard so that it could become part of the conversation, part of the dialogue, part of the debate in Washington.
John, you spend a lot of your time trying to convince financial institutions like Allstate that they should be developing products for the and underbanked in our country. And you spend a lot of time working with the and underbanked to help increase their financial literacy and fluency so that they can really start to build lives once they're on a good path. Could you talk a little bit about Operation Hope and kind of the two sides of this equation, and also just speak a bit about why you're now moving toward the language of financial dignity instead of financial literacy?
First of all, I commend Allstate. Your CEO is a very cool guy. He's so cool, I made him an honorary black man, by the way.
I hope he's here to hear this.
You can tell him I said so.
I will.
And don't worry, it's all going to be
tweet it right
archived on the
now.
web, so he can replay it over and over again when he needs a little boost.
Look, I think she was very gracious in the way she articulated this, and it's her job, and she does it well. I'd say this very bluntly. These are your future customers. You know, a large part of corporate America is trading the same customer over and over again. You go to some communities, there's a bank on every corner, you know, insurance agent, every other strip center. I think that the so-called poor can literally save capitalism. I think that we've just got to make free enterprise and capitalism work for the so-called poor. I think there's a difference between being broke and being poor. That being broke is economic, but being poor is a disabling frame of mind and a depressed condition of your spirit. You must vow never to be poor again. I think that what we're going through right now is not a recession, Chelsea. It's a reset. And it's more a crisis of virtues and values than it is an economic crisis. And we've got to get our mojo again. We've got to find our storyline again. We are a great freaking country. And so when I see the so-called poor coming through my door, I don't see a problem. I see unmet needs. I see the unfulfilled dreams. I see hope, aspiration, opportunity that has not been met by a role model, a business, an entrepreneur. I mean, let's be blunt about it. What do you think a drug dealer is? I mean, if you see a so-called successful drug dealer, that may be an oxymoron, and he may be a moron. And he may have to pay his debt to society, and he's got to work his way up to see God and find a way in. Good luck. But if you're a successful drug dealer, one thing you're not is dumb. You understand import, export, finance, marketing, wholesale, retail, customer service, profit margin, geography, territory, security. So we put, I think, this is election season, you can't get around it. Politicians are important, who wins the election is important. But I think we put far too much emphasis on elected officials and far too less emphasis on ourselves. So I'm launching America 2020, which is a campaign for Americans, by Americans, to take America back. And part of that is our Hope Centers. We're building a Hope Financial Dignity Center at Ebenezer Church. Mayor Kasim Reed is here of Atlanta. I believe that if Dr. King was alive today, this would be the work he'd be doing. Financial literacy, I found, which we helped to formalize with the government, but we found that that's not the answer. If you want to put a kid to sleep, give him a financial literacy course. But financial dignity brings in the aspirations, the hopes, the dreams. I mean, nobody in here wants a home loan. Nobody said, ooh, give me a red subprime mortgage, 20% interest with points. Ooh, I can't wait to get one of those. They want to become a homeowner, maybe too badly. So in this crisis, we asked what was the payment, not what was the interest rate. And you never ask what the payment is when there's an interest rate attached. Nobody wants a car loan, they want a cool car. Kids don't want an education, I hate to say it. They want aspirations, they want to be successful, they want to get rich. They want to at least have a shot at success in their life. My job is to give them that shot. So when you walk into a Hope Center, the first thing we do is pull your credit report. If you're black, you tend to have bad credit. If you're Latino, you tend to have no credit. They're generalizations, but they tend to stick. If you happen to be black, we have a nice laugh. The point is, we're helping you to not de-dignify the fact that you've got problems. Everybody has problems. Then we back into the loan approval by figuring out why you'd be declined for a loan. Our mission is to move you to a 700 credit score. So at Ebenezer Church, we're building a Hope Financial Dignity Center, 4 square block area. The first commitment we're doing here is the Hope Center Ebenezer. Second one is to move that community to a 700 credit score neighborhood. Because that neighborhood's a 550 credit score neighborhood. So check cashers are targeting that marketplace. Payday loan lenders, rent-to-own stores, title lending stores, they're even renting rims now. It just drives me crazy. And liquor stores are next to that because they're all feeding on poverty. So what's my point? If you can move a 550 credit score, 120 points, to 670, you change everything. So in 5 years, now the check casher turns into a bank or a credit union through market forces. The liquor store turns into a convenience store through market forces. And people need less consumer protection because now they got more consumer empowerment. The guy who made the suit I'm wearing is a guy we moved 120 points on his credit score, gave him a $35,000 loan, a lot of confidence, financial counseling, financial dignity. He's now doing $800,000 a year in revenue, running his own business, 6 employees, hiring people, paying his taxes, raising his children.
And so clearly, Pathways to Opportunity is not only a challenge for individuals, but for communities. And
It's a culture.
absolutely, and clearly for our country. Jerry Sue, you shared earlier that you've been sort of building pathways at the community college level now for close to 40 years. Could you talk a little bit about the Traice Model, why you don't only believe, but you know that it works, and what the role of community colleges and kind of the ecosystem of community colleges really should be in helping us all get to John's 2020 plan for America?
Well, I think community colleges around the country, including the one that I am president of in Cleveland, Ohio, really are community-based, and we have open doors. And so it means that anybody can access higher education and workforce training skills. But really the challenge is partnering both with other public institutions in our community as well as private, so public-public partnerships, public-private partnerships, to make sure that we are enticing people into those open doors for the kinds of training that we can provide for relevant jobs. One of the things that we do at Cuyahoga Community College is stay very close to the businesses in our community so we know who's hiring and what they're hiring, and eliminating this whole idea of a skills gap. People in our communities across the nation are saying we need to hire employees, and the same number of open jobs that there are across this country, the same number of people unemployed. It's not coincidental. It simply means that we have to train more people for the jobs that are available, making sure that the companies are very specific with us about the skills, competencies that they want in those jobs. And then I think we have to work very closely with neighborhood and community organizations to entice people into education, because some people, underserved, poor, may not have had a good experience in their K through 12 institutions. And so we have to make sure that they recognize that there's a second chance, that community colleges are uniquely American institutions that can provide an opportunity for that second chance for a young person who dropped out of school, or that veteran who's coming back home who never went to college, went right out of high school into the military because there were no jobs available in the community for him or her. So I think it's a matter of creating, I like the pathways to opportunities, but in community colleges we call it the pathways to possibilities, helping people understand that they don't have to be hopeless. And I think in some of our research and studies, we found that there's a lag in the sense of the American dream, that people still believe that there is an American dream there for them, but it's not a reality. They're living in poverty. They don't see the way out of their economic situation. So a big piece of it is closing that lag gap of understanding that if you don't do something today to better yourself, to help your family, to improve the circumstances that you're in, that it's not going to happen. There is no elevator to the top. It's one step at a time. It's one course at a time. It's one credential at a time. And employers are asking for those credentials, and we are acutely aware that we can't have people just coming, taking a course in community colleges. They need to leave with a credential that says to business and industry, this is what I can do. I am bringing a credential to the table that tells you I can weld, or that I can get a job in business, or that I can start my own business. What are those hopeful pieces that we can instill in them? And a lot of that eradication of poverty means, I agree with you, we have to do it for ourselves. It really is about those of us coming together, public, private, making sure that we bring our resources to the table. None of us have enough to get the job done alone. It's by pooling our resources together and having a common goal for people to lift them up to what is the American dream. The American dream that our parents had, a better life for us. We want the same thing for those in our community.
And Jerry Sue, how nimble is Traice Community College as the needs of the surrounding business community and even the surrounding local governments change? How quickly are you able to respond in what you're teaching in the classroom?
Well, the Midwest has been really a manufacturing communities. We make things in the Midwest for sure, but we're having to make different things. In the past in Cleveland, we were steel and iron. I'll give you but one example, that welding was huge in the Cleveland area. And so if you were a welder, you could get a great job in the automotive industry where you were making parts for the cars in Detroit. Well, we're saying to those same dislocated welders, now we need to teach you how to weld medical devices, medical instruments. We're still teaching welding. It didn't go away. Manufacturing hasn't gone away, but it's different. We have to turn the dial for people and help them understand that the skills that they have can be applied to new industries in our community. So we have to be nimble. We have to take out programs that are no longer viable, and we have to add new programs without new resources, Chelsea. We know we're not going to get new resources. How do we reallocate the resources that we have, bringing up new programs when we take out old ones?
And Aijin, in your work, you similarly see a workforce that is primed to take advantage of a growing opportunity, not only in New York City, the city that we share, but really across the country. Could you talk a little bit about that and how you're going to try to solve for that equation?
Absolutely. So every day, at least 2 million women go to work in other people's homes as caregivers, housekeepers, nannies, and they do the work that we call the work that makes all other work possible, the work of caring for families across generations. And that work has never adequately been accounted for or protected in this country. In fact, domestic workers are excluded from almost every major labor law. And so it's not really a sustainable form of work with real pathways. What we're seeing today is that that's changing. Women like Thelma Reita, who's a caregiver for the elderly in Los Angeles, she works for $35 per day, a 12-hour-a-day shift. So she's working for incredibly low wages. But she and women like her are coming together. And in New York, we were successful in passing a breakthrough piece of legislation called the Domestic Workers' Bill of Rights in 2010. And we're working to pass similar legislation in California right now as we speak. And not only is there an opportunity to improve the quality of jobs, but we have a tremendous opportunity now with the growing need for care in this country. The country is changing really rapidly. Not only are communities of color growing, but we're also aging as a nation at a rate of a person every 8 seconds turning 65 in America today. 10,000 people per day, 4 million people per year turning 65. And what that means is that every single one of us in this room is gonna have one, if not more, family members who are gonna need care just to meet their basic daily needs. It's a huge opportunity to lean in to a place in the economy where there's potential for growth, where there's potential for job creation to the tune of at least 2 million, and create real quality jobs and improve access to quality care for each and every one of us who's gonna need it. So it's a win-win solution for our families, for this incredibly important workforce, and for the economy, where we can really lean in and create the kind of growth with dignity, the kind of reset that we've been talking about here today.
And Aijin, oh, please. What types of partners and partnerships do you need to make that vision a reality?
all kinds. In fact, I think there's a role for every single person in this room in this vision. We have at the table unions like SCIU, AFSCME, the AFL-CIO, who represent workforces, the home care workforce today. We have at the table the National Council on Aging, where we're really looking to bring together veterans organizations, Alzheimer's associations, people who are on the consumer side of care, disability rights organizations, the National Centers on Independent Living are involved, as well as women's organizations, family caregiver groups, elected officials, and community colleges, community organizations. There's a tremendous opportunity for training here, and we think through partnerships with community colleges, we can establish the training programs that we need to prepare this workforce for the 21st century.
Now, IGEN has helped make visible a too often invisible part of many of our lives and our country. And Kyle, you're doing something similar with former offenders, which is also, though sadly, unlike our growing aged, since I have parents who are above 65, I'm quite grateful that demographic is growing. Unfortunately, our ex-offender population is growing because the number of people that we incarcerate continues to grow. More than 1 in 31 Americans now is somewhat under the supervision of the criminal justice system in our country. That means people serving time, or people waiting for trial, or people who are out on parole. Now more than 1 in 10 African American men is under the supervision of the criminal justice system. This too is a growing population with unique needs that it is in all of our interest to figure out what the right pathways to opportunity are for them, I would argue, while they're still in prison, and certainly when they get out. Could you talk a little bit about Triple Thread and the work that you do there? And also, I was so moved backstage when you said it has been your pathway to opportunity. So please share a little bit about that as well.
Sure. To that pathway, I was a student at the Clinton Global Initiative and made a commitment there to start Triple Thread. And it completely revolutionized my own pathway forward. And it is also along the lines of partnerships, a pathway forward for nonprofits. Triple Thread has been a pathway forward, and a pathway forward for former offenders into jobs. Triple Thread is a screen printing company, and we employ former offenders in the creation of custom apparel. Men get out of prison. We work with a halfway house that houses these men, and they have job training and employment with us at Triple Thread. That's core to a re-entry back into society. And then you have this nonprofits that run this halfway house that have trouble finding grants right now in this tight economy. And they've been able to generate a revenue stream through Triple Thread to support their own programming. And me as a student, I've been able to gain the skills necessary to become more employable, to become an entrepreneur through the creation of something like Triple Thread. It's a social enterprise model that has both a purpose and a profit blended together. Our men who work with us are able to find temporary employment with us, that immediate employment right out of prison, the job training, and the references necessary to find a job elsewhere. We have our lead printer. He was our first employee. His name is William Williams, and he is in charge of our floor now. He has had a pathway to opportunity. He's the one who interviews our future employees. He has a prison number. He knows how to see past the BS. He knows how to motivate. He knows who is ready to come back in and who can benefit the greatest from being an employee at Triple Thread. So it's a lot of partnerships, a lot of blending of value. It's not just for a marginalized community. It is for students who can get involved in nonprofits. It is for nonprofits themselves who can support their own projects that create opportunities for others.
Do you, oh, please. And Kyle, do you find more of your cohort seeing challenges that they deeply resonate with and then feel compelled to try to help ameliorate in their own ways and are following pathways analogous to what you've done?
Definitely. The trouble that some recent college graduates find in finding jobs makes them more cognizant of the problems that our country are facing, and has created a significant interest in social enterprise and jobs with purpose in the nonprofit sector. I have many colleagues that graduated with me from my university who started a mobile market that creates access to healthy food in food deserts and is now creating jobs in our community. Someone else who's creating a publishing company that harnesses stories that are told to children in developing countries and creates books and illustrations and sells that across the world, and not only educates children on a global level across the world, but the profits from those books go back into education initiatives in the country of origin of those stories. So over and over again, we're finding students starting initiatives that are based around enterprise, around entrepreneurship, and have an intrinsic value as far as purpose, social purpose built into them.
It's terrific. You mentioned sort of the student debt that many of your fellow students or recently former students confront. And I'm sure most of us are aware of the rather ignoble threshold that we crossed in this country a few months ago, in which aggregate student loan debt now outweighs aggregate credit card debt. And then only a couple months after that, aggregate student loan debt surpassed $1 trillion in value. Even going to community college and seeking out meaningful vocational training often carries a cost. John, how do you help the young men and women and the families that you work with think about how to sequence their lives so that they're able to really build a sustainable platform or stairway? I loved that analogy from Jerry Sue. And don't sort of stumble at the beginning in such a way that it prevents them from realizing their own dreams.
It's a great question, Chelsea. With the adult population, to finish the Hope Center analogy, we start with the end in mind. The Bible says, well, there is no vision, the people perish. So you got to give people some aspirations and hopes and dignity to hold on to in the front end. When you walk in that Hope Center, we approve you day one, subject to the resolution of your primary denial factors. Then we back into the primary denial factors. Thick file underwriting, copy of utility bills, copies of rent statements, copies of phone bills, things that don't show up in your credit report, but make you credit worthy. We help you dollar for dollar with a matching grant for home ownership. We'll match you dollar for dollar up to $10,000. We give you financial dignity training, counseling. Now your pride is up, your confidence is up. By the time we finish with you, credit scores up, down payment, underwriting is, every bank in town wants to fund that loan. So in 10 years, I've never had to actually execute on a commitment I've made to fund every loan, because out of 3,000 loans we've made to make homeowners and small business owners, every time the bank steps up. It proves that the system works when you work for the people and you design it so that people can actually win. But that's, thank you. But Chelsea, if you don't mind, I'm just bursting at the seams.
Please, burst.
What Kyle is doing, as I'm looking at all of these heroes and sheroes in this audience and the people on this stage, and as I think about you and the fact you spent a week in an underserved community last week, it's not like you're not busy. Well, that's a legacy of your parents. That's great role models. Everybody here is doing something, and everybody in this audience is doing something, not because they're brilliant, because they saw somebody, and they said, I can do that. The book, The Tipping Point, says that Malcolm Gladwell proves scientifically 5% of all role models a community stabilizes. So last year, Jim Clifton, the chairman and CEO of Gallup, we did a Gallup Hope Index. First time youth have ever been polled. 30 million kids, 4th grade through 12th grade. 91% of all kids not afraid to take risks. So our kids aren't lazy and they aren't full of fear, unlike us. 77% of all kids want to be their own boss. 44% of all kids want to own their own business. I find it interesting that the 77 and the 44 are different numbers.
Hopefully those numbers get closer together from,
Hopefully. I
12th
got an
grade
answer.
versus 4th grade.
But 5% of all kids have a business internship or a business role model today. Now, why is America still the leader of the free world? Because we're right at that tipping point and inflection point. I have an idea that I think is the best idea I've ever had in my life. It's God's idea. He loaned it to me. I think that we can crush the dropout rate in this country. Crush it. I think, there's no doubt, just crush it. I think that we can make education cool again so kids want to stay in school. I think that we have dumbed down in this country. Quincy Jones says it takes 20 years to change a culture. In the last 20 years, we've made dumb sexy. We've dumbed down and celebrated it. And we've got to make smart sexy again.
So what's your big idea?
So the idea is hope business in a box. And think about now give me the worst high school in the worst community. Just give it to me. 1,000 kids. Every kid goes through a course in dignity. You can't talk about religion, you can't pray in school, but kids need values. Gives them self-esteem. Then give them the language of money, checking, savings, credit, investment, the history of banking. Then give them a primer course in entrepreneurship. By the way, it doesn't have to be our course. So this could be junior achievement, could be 4-H, it doesn't matter. But nifty. Here's the magic. We come up with 25 businesses. Every kid can start for $500 or less. Elementary school kid, $50 to $100. Middle school kid, $250. High school kid, $500. We tell the kids to pick one, do a 2-page summary. Why should they bother? Because in 45 days, we're coming back to their school, and we're gonna do a pitch event in their auditorium. Think Shark Tank for kids. So now 8 local business leaders have to be local. Come up on the stage. Kid comes up, they have 2 minutes to pitch their idea. Now their endorphins are firing about who they can be and what they can do. Somebody's listening to them, paying attention to them. They pitch their idea. You and I are on the stage. We're sitting there. We go, that was pretty cool. Needs a little rough around the edges, but it's pretty. Congratulations, you just won a Hope Business in a Box Youth Entrepreneurship Grant for $500. In the box and BBDO is designing the box. Gallup has made a 100-year commitment to measure every schoolhouse in America and what I'm telling you. In the box is an operational polo shirt, a operational wristband, a certificate of completion of all the programming I just mentioned to you. Think Girl Scout and Boy Scout merit badges growing up. A profile on the business role model we're going to assign to the kid, and a $500 certificate. The only way you can get the money, though, is a parent or guardian or a business role model has to take the kid to a bank or credit union and open a bank account. Now you have smartphone videos of all the kids opening accounts in your community. Goes up to the local website for Hope Business in a Box. And the business role model spends an hour a week for 4 to 6 weeks working with that kid to stand up their business. And Gallup measures the whole thing, beginning, middle, and end. Here's my goal. I want to double the level of financial literacy in that school in 5 years. I want to double the level of economic energy in that school in 5 years. But I want to quadruple the level of business role models in that school. If I can move business role models from 5%, and in inner cities it's almost 0. Remember the drug dealer I mentioned earlier? Kids want to be rap stars, athletes, and drug dealers, not because they're dumb or stupid. These kids are brilliant. They're just modeling what they see. And we've got to give them something different to see. So, cut to the chase. My goal, 25,000 youth business in a box entrepreneurs in America between now and 2020. To double the level of financial literacy, double the level of economic energy, organize it, quadruple the level of business role models, and you will crush the dropout rate in that school, because every kid just wants an opportunity. They want a shot at the American dream. They want a job. They don't want a lecture. They don't want somebody to tell them to go get good grades. They want to be successful in their lives. This is an opportunity that everybody can do for $5,000 a school. We can do this in every school in America. Every local business, dentist, doctor, barbershop can adopt their local school.
All state insurance offices?
I'm all over them like a cheap suit.
We'll recruit.
But truly, how do you react from a business perspective to this? And what insurance products do you think not only these kids need, but sort of the women whom IGEN hopes will be able to better assert their own dignity through a new path forward in care need? I mean, listening to this conversation, what does the business side of your brain think?
Yeah, really, really good question. And I think I could link in what everybody has already said, what you believe in and what you practice every day in your lives. And that really is dignity and hope. And in particular, financial literacy or dignity. I very much like the way that you've described that. We've found that in underserved populations for sure. If I can just give an example, we made a commitment a year and a half ago at CGI that for victims of domestic violence, we would economically empower 100,000 of them by the end of 2013, because
and what does that mean, economic empowerment?
Yeah, it means that they will have, they'll go through a financial literacy training curriculum, that they will have financial stability in their lives, and we know that for victims of domestic violence, control is largely, in addition to physical abuse, control is largely through financial abuse. So bad credit scores, families leaving their homes, leaving their assets in order to leave an abusive relationship with their families. So we've worked very hard with leading national organizations to help provide this financial curriculum to now, I'm happy to say, we've surpassed the goal of 100,000 of the victims of domestic violence. And for 94% of those who have taken the curriculum, they are free of an abusive relationship, which is absolutely amazing. It gets back to dignity. It gets back to financial dignity and financial literacy. So what we know is that the number one predictor of whether you will be free of an abusive relationship, if you've been in one, is the ability to have a financial stability in your lives. So we see this in so many ways. We see the profound impact that business can have when we apply our own knowledge. In this case, our mission certainly is to prepare and protect Americans for a safe and prosperous future. And in ways through underserved communities or even served communities, we're seeing the benefit of it. We're seeing the benefit for our agency force. We've got 12,000 agencies who are independent employers and business
hopefully
operators.
Are going to participate in John's
They will.
program.
I hope we make that 13,000. Maybe we can make a commitment here, John, together, that we can make that happen for next year's, in time for next year's CGI. But we absolutely see the fact that our agency owners are deeply involved in these initiatives in the community. It is good for their business. It's good for their employees. It's good for the communities that they serve. We see that with our employees as well, who are absolutely passionate and committed volunteers to helping, in fact, enhance the financial stability of the lives of the middle class. It makes a big difference.
John?
Chelsea, let me make one last point on this. As much as, and this, again, Allstate's a very honorable company, and we've got a bunch of other companies who supported us. But philanthropy is not enough. There's not enough philanthropic dollars in the world to solve these problems. What I'm talking about is a business case. Gallup has projected that global GDP will be $200 trillion by 2040. It's right now around $62 trillion. America's a quarter of that. So we're the leader of the free world because we're the economic leader. The question is, who gets $140 trillion? Between now and 2040, that's the question. That's who leads the free world. The 30 million kids, 4th grade through 12th grade, is the bench strength for the playoff games of the rest of our lives. And no one's focusing on their economic energy. No one's focusing on making them job creators. Look, the kids I grew up with, they're natural hustlers. But no one's organizing their energy, mentoring them, giving them business role models, giving them the tools to save their own lives. We can pop GDP growth, I think 2%, by focusing on youth economic energy so we can do well and create jobs in America.
Well, John, I would argue that your cohort does have a role model in you. And I certainly was asking Joan about the business side of her brain, and I would think it would be in the interest of local Allstate franchisees and other local businesses to mentor the kids that hopefully will participate in your program, because those very well could be not only their future employees, but maybe their future investments.
Amen.
So I certainly agree with you on that point.
Chelsea, you know, it's about
please.
changing scripts. And I think we've been talking about how young people have set a script in their head, or the communities or families or whatever, about who they are, what they can do, and their limitations. And I think part of it is helping to change that script in their head, rewriting that script for them so that they realize that there is dignity, that they do have value, that they can make a contribution to our economy, that they are a huge resource, that they are valuable. And I think it's our community organizations, business and industry, education, coming together at those crossroads to make sure we're there for them and showing them the pathways to get to where they need to go. Not all kids are going to start a business, but it's wonderful to have kids who are entrepreneurial, who can see themselves starting a business, that someone believes in me and someone is giving me the skills to start a business, to think about that in the future. Other kids are going to work for somebody. And what are those competencies that we can give to them that empower them to know that they can get that job, that they can work alongside everybody else in America and be part of the economic development of our country? And so I think we're talking about, in some ways, creating new scripts, changing scripts, participating in that, and helping people to understand that they are a valuable part of our landscape.
Chelsea,
Please.
can I just add to that? I wholeheartedly endorse that. And this is an issue now which requires great urgency and leadership, because as we've seen, not only in our polls, Chelsea, but in other polls, 2/3 of Americans believe that their children, the next generation, will not have a better quality of life than they do. And these children, John, to your point, these children are growing up in those households where there is a sense of diminished expectation for their progress and their contributions. So this really requires the kind of public-private leadership and partnership with great urgency to make sure that these kids, our next generation, are not growing up with a sense of diminished aspiration.
Yes, it is one area in which I agreed with former President Bush, and I think he actually encapsulated this challenge more eloquently than anyone else. There is nothing worse than the bigotry of low expectations. And I could not agree with that more. And I also could not thank each of you more for repudiating that every day in the work that you're doing. And I think you have a room full of people now who want to be on your side in whatever work you do in our city, in our schools, in our country, for communities that are too often invisible and ignored, when we know that we need everyone to be part of the solution to live in the world that we all want our kids to grow old in. Thank you very much, and thank you all for your time.